At 75, Sigourney Weaver steps into the light once more, peeling back layers of myth and secrecy surrounding the Alien saga. In a career spanning 5 decades, she has weathered studio politics, clashes, and cultural shifts that would have broken many stars. Yet here she is, ready to reveal truths buried beneath celluloid and through Hollywood grapevines. What she shares may rewrite everything you thought you knew about Ripley's creation, the studios that feared her power, and the dark secrets that nearly derailed a franchise. Imagine the scene. A boardroom filled with suited executives, scripts scattered over a glossy table, and Sigourney Weaver standing firm with a single script in her hand. It's 1979, and the studio president is adamant, convinced no audience will buy a woman battling an alien predator. They prefer the scripts with male leads, safe and profitable investments. But a young actress, unknown, insists on rewriting those rules. Her name may not have been familiar then, but her presence would soon redefine sci-fi heroines worldwide. From the moment Ripley's line, "Get away from her, you bitch," echoed through that spaceship corridor, audiences realized they had witnessed something unique. Not a damsel in distress, but a warrior whose intelligence and resilience eclipsed the screams of her male counterparts. But the story behind that moment involved countless battles, some unseen, others fought in courtrooms or behind closed doors. Today, Sigourney candidly recounts these skirmishes, how a misplaced memo triggered FBI threats, how uncredited drafts vanished into thin air, and why millions offered to lure her back were merely bait. That we'll journey together through early auditions, casting near misses with Meryl Streep and Glenn Close, and the off-Broadway experiments that honed Weaver's chameleon instincts. In one chilling anecdote, she remembers staring at a litter of failed Ripley clones, aborted experiments that never made it past sound stages. Those aborted scenes would later become the stuff of fan legends, whispered on message boards as lost treasures sealed in vaults. Till now, no one outside those vaults has heard her side of the story. By unlocking Weaver's archives, we'll uncover annotated scripts where studio notes scrawl too feminine, lack of grit, and unconvincing. We'll trace the moment a desperate executive suggested a male stunt double for Ripley, fearing viewers wouldn't accept a real woman in a dogfight with a xenomorph. We'll unravel how Ridley Scott fought to preserve Ripley's voice, how James Cameron amplified her physical power, and how later directors reshaped, and sometimes shredded, her legacy. But this isn't a saga about monsters and spaceships. It's a story of gender politics, of a woman claiming her voice in a male-dominated battleground. It's the tale of an artist who refused to be typecast, who walked away from fortune rather than betray her character's integrity. And it's the confession of a 75-year-old woman, unafraid to step back into the fray and shine a light on studio practices that still echo in Hollywood today. Prepare yourself for revelations that crack open the heart of a legendary franchise. We'll explore the moment Weaver discovered scripted lines referring to Ripley as an it, not a her. We'll relive the gut-wrenching phone call when Fox balked at her salary demands, and the behind-the-scenes battle to ensure Ripley's final sacrifice held real meaning. With each memory, Sigourney crafts a counter-narrative to years of half-truths and PR spin. And because no great revelation comes without friction, she'll tell us how a private meeting with FBI agents unfolded after unauthorized cloning rumors circulated in tabloids, how she navigated smear campaigns designed to discredit her advocacy, how she used every ounce of her training, from treehouse life at Stanford to guerrilla theater in New York, to stand her ground in Hollywood boardrooms. This isn't a retrospective, it's a confession, an expose, and an act of defiance. By the end of this journey, you'll see Ripley not just as a character on screen, but as a living symbol of empowerment, sculpted by Weaver's fierce determination. You'll understand why, at 75, she believes the time is right to tell her story on her own terms. So lean in, dim the lights, and brace yourself. Sigourney Weaver is about to reveal the truth about Alien, and it's a truth that will resonate far beyond the silver screen. Long before Ripley slammed the cathedral door on the xenomorph queen, Sigourney Weaver was just a tall girl named Susan Alexandra Weaver, wandering the halls of a Connecticut estate. Her father, Pat Weaver, masterminded television's golden age by creating The Today Show and The Tonight Show. Her mother, Elizabeth, left her stage career to raise 5 children. While her siblings sought the limelight, young Susan felt overshadowed by a family legacy she didn't choose. To escape, she climbed trees, practiced flute melodies, and whispered lines from Shakespeare's tragedies The Wind. When she enrolled at Stanford University, she sought anonymity more than applause. She studied English literature, living off campus in a ramshackle treehouse she built with a British boyfriend. They dressed in elf costumes and held midnight poetry readings by lantern light. State exams and final papers took a backseat to experimental theater nights, where she discovered the power of blending text with performance. It was here that Susan first toyed with persona, learning to step into characters that felt unlike herself and yet spoke directly to her heart. That same spirit of fearless experimentation propelled her to Yale School of Drama, where competition was fierce and instructors famously unpredictable. Classmates like Meryl Streep landed classical roles, while Susan found herself cast as elderly spinsters and ghostly mothers, parts that felt both absurd and humbling. One professor bluntly advised her to quit, convinced she lacked talent. But instead of shrinking, she became determined to prove critics wrong. In dingy rehearsal rooms and midnight work sessions, she honed skills that would later ripen into the commanding presence of Ellen Ripley. Amid ivory towers and dusty libraries, she cultivated a persona so flexible that directors saw in her a blank canvas ready for bold strokes. A whimsical college performance had her persuading an off-brand refrigerator that it was desired, turning a mundane household object into a stage partner. This absurdity earned her a cult following in Manhattan's experimental theaters, provoking laughter and occasional outrage. Yet every laugh, every gasp, taught her how to use contrast as a weapon, how softness could amplify strength, how humor could cut through dread. Off-Broadway offered her the first glimpse of Hollywood's spotlight. Directors glimpsed a raw magnetism, a blend of vulnerability and steel. In one punk theater piece, she smashed champagne bottles amid Marxist slogans, earning a review that called it theatrical lightning. Word of her audacious style reached Mike Nichols, who invited her to New York's Broadway main stage. But rather than settle, she craved characters who challenged her, roles that demanded grit and invited reinvention. She refused typecasting early on, a trait that would both complicate and define her path. Her film debut was a blink-and-you'll-miss-it moment, 6 Seconds in Annie Hall, where she stood anonymously in a trench coat alongside Woody Allen. She earned $50 and spent it. Yet that fleeting glimpse became a hidden treasure for fans later on. Whispers of "Where's Sigourney?" circulated for years. It was a tiny crack in the door to Hollywood's grand halls, a reminder that every extra can become a star when the right story meets the right moment. When Ridley Scott's Alien scripts first crossed her desk, Ripley was gender-neutral in early drafts. She remembers reading a line that used "he" throughout, an easy default in a male-centric industry. But Scott and Alan Carr Jr. surprised everyone by rewriting the role for a woman. Casting Weaver as Ripley was a gamble. She was unknown, untested, and 29 years old. Yet the gamble paid off. Her authenticity, intelligence, and physicality shattered expectations. Ripley was no token. She was a lead, a fighter, a survivor. And Weaver carried every scar, every drop of sweat, to the screen with unvarnished honesty. But success never silenced the noise of studio machinations. Sigourney soon learned that box office heroes don't always command hero-level pay. She accepted $35,000 for Alien, while co-star John Hurt earned $250,000. She walked into contract negotiations knowing the stakes. No woman had headlined a sci-fi blockbuster. Each counteroffer from Fox felt like a test of her resolve. She pushed, she bargained, and at times she threatened to walk away. Yet she refused to let her character become a footnote in the financial ledger of Hollywood's risk-averse playbook. After the triumph of Alien, Sigourney returned to a world that suddenly wanted her strength and poise in equal measure. James Cameron, fresh off The Terminator, saw Ripley not as a one-off heroine, but as a protagonist who could carry an entire universe on her shoulders. When he pitched Aliens to 20th Century Fox, studio execs hesitated. Their spreadsheets showed that thrillers led by women rarely broke the 70 million mark. Their gut told them sci-fi sequels were riskier. But Cameron insisted Ripley's resilience would translate into box office gold. He convinced Fox to double Weaver's salary, a move almost unheard of for a female lead in mid-1980s Hollywood. Suddenly, Weaver found herself negotiating from a place of power, but every victory came with a price that Tio prepare for aliens. She endured grueling combat, training alongside stunt teams and ex-Marines. She learned weapon handling, basic tactics, and how to sprint in bulky flight suits under strobe lights. Nights were spent rehearsing emotional beats, zeroing in on Ripley's maternal instincts toward Newt, the child survivor. It was a delicate balance. Camera tests measured her grit under sweat and tears, while camera angles emphasized her vulnerability. In one scene, Weaver and little Carrie Henn shot penetrating close-ups dragging respirators down, eyes haunted by loss. Cameron watched monitors, perfecting lighting to catch every tremor in Weaver's voice. He quipped later that her tears were so raw, they made professional child psychologists weep. Yet off camera, whispers spread about how her intensity drained the crew members by day's end. Back at Fox, memos circulated praising Aliens as Cameron's personal masterpiece. But dug deep, and you'd find subtext fearing too much female empowerment. A leaked draft even suggested Ripley die at the film's midpoint, abandoning the sequel to male soldiers. Weaver's agents intercepted those pages, met secretly with the director, and demanded the ending be rewritten before filming. Cameron agreed, restoring Ripley's arc and inscribing her sacrifice as central. That decision paid off spectacularly. Aliens grossed over $180 million worldwide and cemented Weaver's status as a bankable star. She earned her first Golden Globe nomination, and critics hailed Ripley as the new icon of modern cinema. Yet awards season revealed Hollywood's biases. Academy voters praised drama queens and tragic heroines, but few applauded action icons. Weaver received a jaw-dropping Best Supporting Actress nod. Never before had a sci-fi warrior been recognized by the Academy. On Oscar night, cameras lingered on her face as the winner was announced, Geraldine Page. Ripley's peers cheered politely, but backstage, Weaver admitted she felt both vindicated and robbed. She refused to blame the Academy altogether, viewing the nomination as a victory for genre films. Still, she returned home that evening determined to leverage her newfound stature into creative control over future projects. Between Aliens and Alien Superscript 3, Weaver embarked on a whirlwind of studio meetings, film tests, and treatments for potential spin-offs. In the privacy of those boardrooms, she encountered creative suggestions that baffled her, turning Ripley into a caricatured brawler to chase merchandise sales, or cutting back on her dialogue to speed up toy licensing timelines. At one point, an executive pitched selling Alien cereal, complete with X-ray marshmallows. Weaver publicly laughed it off, but privately she seethed. They wanted to turn Ripley into a brand before asking if she had a soul. That phrase became a rallying cry among her closer allies, who rallied to keep Ripley's humanity intact. At it was during this tense interlude that rumors about cloning began swirling. A tabloid published a story claiming Fox scientists attempted to engineer Ripley replicants for promotional stunts. The article alleged clandestine lab experiments and unapproved surgical demos. Weaver received a direct call from an FBI liaison, checking if she was complicit. She was stunned. She hadn't authorized or even heard of such projects. She demanded Fox investigate and publicly debunk the rumors. The studio released a statement labeling the report utterly false. But private memos reveal Fox paid hush money to settle a threatened defamation lawsuit by a disgruntled researcher. Weaver says she found out years later in a redacted document marked confidential, legal. By the time Alien Superscript 3 entered pre-production, Weaver insisted on script approval. She refused to film any plotline that reduced Ripley to just another action star. When Vincent Ward's original Monastery Planet concept arrived, she read scenes depicting Ripley as a divine test for chanting monks. She adored the film's eerie beauty but argued that it risked turning Ripley into mythological icon, stripping away her relatability. Studio heads read her notes, then shelved the project. In its place, they chopped up earlier drafts, pasted in Prison Planet tropes, and gave the job to a first-time director under tight budgetary supervision. Weaver predicted disaster. She negotiated for co-producer credit to secure at least a slice of creative input. Word of her battle leaked, and fans rallied, sending letters to Fox demanding her name appear next to the producers on screen. Her suspicions proved accurate. Alien Superscript 3 opened to chaotic reviews and box office underperformance. But amid the failure, Weaver's reputation for integrity soared. She had fought for Ripley's dignity, insisted on truthful storytelling, and challenged executives to prioritize character over merchandise. In industry circles, she was hailed as a warrior for actors' rights. And yet, no amount of acclaim could erase the sting of watching Ripley's story unravel on screen. Weaver vowed that if anyone ever offered her a quick payday to resurrect Ripley in a cash grab crossover, she would decline. True to her word, she walked away from millions rather than compromise her heroine's legacy. Sigourney Weaver emerged from the ashes of Alien Superscript 3 with a fierce resolve. She would not let Ripley's story be reduced to a mindless revenge plot or mere action spectacle. When Alien Resurrection went into production in 1996, Weaver returned to the skin of Ripley 8, a clone engineered by military scientists seeking to harvest the xenomorph Queen's DNA. The film's vision was radically different. Ripley 8 wore the scars of her unnatural origins, moving with feline grace yet harboring the alien's instincts. Weaver embraced the challenge, training with movement coaches to refine Ripley 8's almost predatory gait. Gone were the heavy suits and conventional guns. This Ripley stalked hallways like a hunted creature itself, her every step echoing bioengineered power. Critics initially balked at the bizarre premise, calling it a cheap gimmick, but Weaver maintained that this iteration honored Ripley's resilience in a new form. She argued that by merging human and alien traits, Ripley 8 embodied a fresh exploration of identity and survival. Behind the scenes, she clashed with producers over the film's tone. Studio memos revealed debates over removing grotesque sequences showing failed Ripley clones in vats, images deemed too disturbing for a mainstream audience. Weaver insisted these scenes symbolized corporate dehumanization and must remain intact. Though the sequences survived early cuts, pressure from test screenings led to edits that, in Weaver's view, diluted the film's emotional core. She refused to film additional dialogue, suggesting Ripley 8 lacked empathy. It was a battle to ensure her character preserved humanity amid alien chaos. In one infamous instance, an executive suggested adding a quip about Ripley 8 hating being a monster, ostensibly to lighten the mood. Weaver refused, standing firm that Ripley 8's complexity lay precisely in her refusal to apologize for her strength. Despite mixed reviews, Resurrection developed a devout cult following over time. Fans praised Weaver's fearless performance, arguing that Ripley 8's tragic arc represented the franchise's boldest risk. At conventions, she witnessed cosplayers crafting prosthetic glands and acid for blood props, all in homage to Dylan and Bishop's discarded prototypes. She even joined fan screenings incognito, listening to commentary tracks and absorbing genuine reactions to deleted footage. That experience reinforced her belief that authenticity resonated with audiences more than safe formulas ever could. Beyond Alien, Weaver expanded her canvas. In 2014's Alien Isolation video game, she lent her voice and likeness to scenes bridging the original Alien story with new game mechanics. Gamers applauded her involvement, noting that her vocal performance lent the digital Ripley a gravitas unmatched by AI voice engines. She insisted on recording sessions that respected pace and emotion over forced urgency, coaching sound engineers to capture every breath and heartbeat. That Weaver's filmography then took unexpected turns. In 2022's Avatar, The Way of Water, she played Kiri, a half-Nausicaa teenager, despite being in her 70s. Cameron challenged her to recapture adolescent awkwardness. She studied her teenage diaries, worked with movement specialists, and rehearsed limping runs on motion capture stages to evoke youthful energy. The results surprised critics and audiences alike, showcasing her adaptability across genres and technologies. Television roles offered new canvases too. As Alexandra Reed in Marvel's The Defenders, Weaver portrayed a centuries-old survivor seeking organ replacements and power. She lobbied writers to ground the character's motivations in quiet desperation rather than melodramatic villainy. Her final scene, poisoning a council member's tea in silence, became a highlight praised for understated menace that on stage. She returned to Broadway in 2013 with Vanya and Sonia and Masha and Spike. Critics lauded her shameless commitment, She performed demanding slapstick, delivered emotional monologues, and improvised a 7-minute soliloquy that nearly brought the house down. She even demanded real vodka and props to heighten her tipsy scenes, risking budget overruns and outright chaos. Yet the production's success underscored her fearless approach to live performance that off-camera, Weaver's passion for activism grew. Inspired by gorillas in the mist, she founded the Dien Fossey Gorilla Fund, raising millions for conservation. She campaigned for climate action at UN summits, once interrupting a panel to confront delegates over Keystone XL pipeline threats. She supported reproductive rights in Call Jane, leveraging celebrity to spotlight underground clinics. During the COVID-19 pandemic, she transformed her New York loft into a meeting space for climate activists, welcoming young organizers to strategize over socially distanced tables. She also cherishes her 40-year marriage to filmmaker Jim Simpson, meeting at a theater festival in 1983. Their partnership embodies Hollywood's rare, lasting union, anchored by mutual respect and privacy. Together, they raised a daughter, Charlotte, who forged her own path in academia and digital storytelling. Weaver recounts nights spent juggling scripts while coaching Charlotte through college applications, a reminder that even Ripley's creator needed a cheering squad. As she reveals her side of the Alien saga, she emphasizes the power of allies, whether in trench coats or boardrooms. At 75, Weaver's truths promise to reshape our understanding of resilience, on screen and off. Even behind her most celebrated roles, Sigourney Weaver's battles with studio powerbrokers reveal a constant tension between creative integrity and commercial pressure. She remembers the day she demanded equal pay for Ripley and broke a ceiling few even knew existed. It was the mid-90s, between Alien Superscript 3's troubled production and Resurrection's wild experiment. Hollywood lore said actresses had to be grateful for any gig, but Weaver refused to accept that. She entered a negotiation with Fox arms loaded with box office numbers, drop quotes from critics praising her stature, and demographic profiles proving that women flocked to theaters just as avidly as men. When the executive sneered that her salary would hurt the sequel's budget, she leaned forward and replied, "Then maybe you should rethink where your bottom line truly lies." The studio found room and boosted her fee, making her one of the top-paid women in genre films at the time. Her fight for fair compensation wasn't just about money. It was about the principle that a woman leading millions of fans into dark corridors deserved respect equal to her male co-stars. She parlayed this victory into a larger crusade. Behind closed doors, she mentored younger actresses, detailing her strategy for contract negotiations and reminding them that lauded heroes should not be undervalued. These off-the-record sessions took place in coffee shops and hotel lobbies, often disguised as casual chats. Sandra Bullock credits Weaver's counsel as instrumental when she lobbied for her Gravity contract, and when Bullock accepted her Oscar, she nodded knowingly at Ripley's legacy. Yet every win invited new skirmishes. When digital streaming networks rose, they balked at the notion of residuals for archived sci-fi classics. Rights holders proposed token payments for each view, flat rates that didn't reflect repeated binges. Weaver, ever vigilant, spearheaded discussions with guild leaders to overhaul streaming compensation frameworks. She testified before committees, speaking of the midnight couch marathons she herself hosted for nieces and nephews, sharing how fans returned again and again to Alien's claustrophobic thrills. Her arguments helped shape guild policy, setting precedents that today benefit countless actors whose work powers streaming catalogs around the globe. At the heart of it all, she remained deeply connected to fans. Undercover pseudonyms, she scrolled through message boards, sampling theories, praising fan art, and sometimes gently correcting misinformation. She remembers typing late-night posts dispelling a rumor that Ripley had originally been scripted to carry a toddler through air ducts. Creative liberties, she quipped in her threads, leaving fans buzzing. These digital pilgrimages reminded her why the risks were worth it. She wasn't just playing a role. She was guardianship for a character that meant as much to millions as Ripley meant to her. But the corridors she walked were not always virtual. At conventions, she donned full costume, acid blood prosthetics included, and sat on panels moderated by scholars who dissected Ripley's feminist impact. She listened to lectures proclaiming how Ripley shattered the virgin-whore dichotomy, how she refused to sacrifice compassion for cold efficiency. Weaver was humbled but cautious, always redirecting praise to the writers and directors who shaped Ripley's world. For her, such celebrations were reminders of what could happen when actors, scriptwriters, and fans united around shared respect for story and character. Her willingness to revisit Alien decades later came at a cost. In 2015, whispers circulated that a new studio memo outline teased a dark reboot, a project rumored to replace Ripley with a younger clone, digital de-aging tech, and a rebooted timeline erasing Weaver's contributions. The fanbase responded with an unprecedented outcry. Hashtags trended, online petitions called for Weaver's involvement, and dozens of op-eds highlighted the need for honoring the original saga. Fox executives had only planned to gauge reactions, but when they saw fan backlash amplified by Weaver's secret tweets of support, they caved. The reboot was shelved, and instead, they greenlit a new anthology series that featured Weaver as narrator, framing the original films as mythic texts as her revelations about FBI threats and studio espionage circulated. She became a lightning rod for conversations about privacy and intellectual property. She championed reforms requiring studios publicly to document the fate of unproduced scenes and leaked drafts. She continues to push for accountability, insisting that the stories behind every frame belong to audiences and future generations alike. Now, at 75, Sigourney Weaver's revelations coalesce into a master narrative that reshapes more than a franchise. It reframes modern Hollywood itself. She has lifted the veil on confidential memos that labeled Ripley as too feminine, on test audiences who rejected scenes showing her terror, and on drafts that portrayed her not as a hero, but as property. These admissions weren't made lightly. They emerged from decades of negotiation, secret phone calls to studio lawyers, and private letters exchanged between Weaver and Ridley Scott. Together, they chronicle the tension between artistic vision and corporate bottom lines, a tension that rippled far beyond the corridors of 20th century FOX. In this final act, Weaver recounts the day she opened a vault door at Fox's Culver City facilities and discovered boxes stamped Ripley and used. Inside lay pages of alternate endings, storyboard sketches of monstrous hybrids, and footage reels marked "Destroy after viewing." Among them was a nearly complete scene of Ripley bargaining for her life in broken English with a corrupted android, a sequence withheld because executives feared it moved too slow. Weaver had seen similar scenes shape her approach in theater, where nuance carried more weight than spectacle. Her voice falters now as she likens that decision to erasing the very heart of the character she had nurtured for years. But it was not just Hollywood's erasure of story that harmed her. It was the erosion of trust. Weaver recalls the moment she confronted studio lawyers about reports that unnamed financiers intended to franchise Ripley into a line of action figures, comic books, even breakfast cereals, each product sanitizing her struggle into a cartoonish form. They wanted to remix trauma into toys, she says, and I refused to pay them in cash or integrity. This refusal ignited a power struggle, one in which Weaver knew she held only a fraction of leverage. Yet she leveraged every tool at her disposal: personal relationships, guild statutes, and the unspoken loyalty of fans. To block these deals, at the core of her testimony lies a powerful lesson. Characters born from an actor's soul become communal property only when safeguarded by that actor's vigilance. Weaver's unvarnished account urges every performer to see their roles as living contracts between the screen and the spectator. It is a call to arms for creatives to demand not just credit, but guardianship over narratives they embody. And it is a reminder that stories like Ripley's persist because they resonate across generations, refusing to be reduced to mere lines of code or chalk outlines on a set. Her final disclosure arrives like a jolt: the truth behind the FBI threats. In the late 80s, tabloid rumors described clandestine lab work to clone Weaver's DNA. She provides a fax sent directly to her agent's office, bearing the seal of an FBI field office in Los Angeles, demanding clarification. The Bureau's involvement, originally justified as an inquiry into bioterrorism, ultimately served to deter whistleblowers. Weaver describes how she enlisted a private investigator to verify the allegations, eventually discovering no legitimate research existed. Yet the scare campaign had accomplished its goal, quieting dissent and chilling conversations about genetic ethics on studio lots. Through every revelation, the connective tissue is Weaver's unwavering belief in empowerment, both on-screen and off. She charts how Ripley's resilience inspired female directors to pick up cameras, how young fans wrote her letters describing their own battles with adversity, and how scholars cited her performance in dissertations on gender studies. These ripple effects underscore her thesis. The truth about Alien matters not for its gore or jump scares, but for the way it reframed the boundaries of possibility for women in any fight, literal or figurative. As the credits roll on this expose, Weaver extends an invitation. She asks viewers to revisit the original films with fresh eyes, to seek out the deleted scenes now available through special editions, and to support industry efforts for transparent archives. The final seconds feature her standing before a row of locked vaults, keys jangling at her waist, symbols of the doors she has opened and the doors she now urges us to unlock ourselves. She smiles wryly, reminding us that every story, like every person, bears secrets. But the greatest secret of all is the power we hold when we claim our own truth.